The Empty Chairs campaign is a collective feminist campaign that we started last year to really draw attention to the ways in which the chairs in UN decision-making spaces and UN human rights spaces like the Human Rights Council are empty when it comes to civil society and just the people of the world. And that's always been the case, but during the COVID-19 pandemic that's been even more the case with the health and travel restrictions that have been put in place. We want to demand a People's Council, a People's Human Rights System, where the focus is not on states and their power and their political interests, but really on people's interests, and where ordinary people across the world can participate and make decisions that are then implemented by political leaders. The international human rights system is important as an accountability tool when it's not possible to get that accountability nationally, which is often the case for all human rights. But currently it's so distant and remote from the people that it's supposed to serve, and I think this square is quite a good illustration of that, because you have the austere, UN buildings here, and you have people visiting and protesting, especially protesting human rights violations in terrible situations to this building that just doesn't respond, that doesn't answer, that you can't access unless you have a UN badge and unless you're able to come here in person. And that's just very far from a people-centered human rights system. Part of the barriers there are to participation are, of course, the costs of coming to Geneva. It's one of the most expensive cities in the world. There's the fact that the majority of this planet's population can't access this continent or this country because of visa regulations, and that's something that happens a lot with people trying to access the UN. There's languages, so unless you speak one of the UN languages, you're not going to be able to express yourself in your first language or to understand what's going on. And of course, many of these languages are languages that have been imposed on the rest of the world by former colonial powers. So that's replicated in, the state of affairs at the UN as well. There is the lack or very insufficient accessibility measures for persons with disabilities. Accessibility is treated as a luxury when in fact it is a human right. And that's quite ironic in a human rights system, that accessibility and to some extent civil society participation is treated as an afterthought or a nice to have. And so you have these formal practical barriers, but then you also have the written and unwritten rules that you're supposed to follow, and expectations on what you should look like, how you should express yourself, in terms of course, gender, race, disability, and age. And those unwritten rules and kind of dominant norms are also very intimidating and can be hostile when you come here. And there's also a way in which everything at the UN happens in this sort of jargon and bureaucratic process that can be hard to follow if you don't speak that language. It's kind of a language in itself as well that can be that can just be a barrier as well to participation. A people's human rights system can't just have the two main headquarters in the global north to start with, so it would rotate across region, across the world. People would be able to access it without visas or ECOSOC status requirements, which kind of constrain participation in this NGO form that's often not compatible with the way social movements work, and people should be able to access the system. It should also hold states accountable, but also look at all the ways in which people's human rights are affected. And of course, that's states, but that's also transnational corporations, that's also international financial institutions, and other bodies that are often portrayed in these spaces as not being relevant to human rights. This is not what we talk about here, but actually this is what impacts people's lives. And of course, people and the people of the world should be able to access, to participate, to making decisions, to set the agenda, and to to implementation and to accountability for these commitments.